Ah, okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the third day of the conference. Does every child still matter? A new approach to education, organised by the National Association for Pastoral Care in Education, otherwise known as NAPCE. My name is Phil Jones, and I'm the National Chair of NAPCE. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you again to this morning's session. A little bit of housekeeping first of all. If I can suggest that you keep your mic on mute unless you're speaking, because that will help with any background noise or interruptions. I'd like to encourage you to keep your cameras on. It is very helpful, I think, to the speakers to be able to see that there are some people out there in the online world, and to have some reaction and interaction with the members of the audience. So really encourage you to keep your cameras on and not be shy this morning. There is a chat function, which is the little icon that looks like a circle, but is not quite a circle. Please use that to send any comments, or if there's any follow-up questions, or to interact at all in any way during this morning's event. We are going to be recording it, so just so that everybody's aware. And for those people who are not joining us live, welcome. Very pleased that you're catching up on the presentations on our final day of the questions. If we lose the connection, we are working in the wonderful world of the internet, so sometimes those challenges happen. If we do lose the connection, what we found is that if you give it a minute, sometimes it reconnects, it comes back. If that doesn't happen, then just log out and log back in again. I know in this modern technical world that seems very simple, but that does tend to work in most situations because it's likely to be a dip in the internet where you are. The purpose of the conference is to really revisit the Every Child Matters agenda, and that was very important as an important part of policy back in the 1980s and 1990s, where it was felt important that educational policy needed to meet the needs of every single young person that we were caring for and working for in schools. And the question is there that following the experience of the pandemic, which I think has made everybody, certainly from the question time event last night, those of you who were there, it's very clear that it's made us step back a little bit as educationalists, as people working in schools, people with an interest in schools, and think about what is important. So the question behind the conference is very much about, is this a point to reset our thinking about education? And today's presentations are really going to help us highlight that. Welcome to Helen and to Maria, and I have the unenviable task of following both of them and bringing the conference to a close with my presentation later on this morning. Before I go to the presentation, I'd just like to spend a few minutes encouraging you, first of all, to join in the conference. The Twitter hashtag for the conference is NAPCECon21. Thank you for those of you who've already been sending tweets and joining in the conversations and the discussions that have been taking place. And please carry on doing that even after the conference comes to an end this morning. I'd also like to spend a few minutes, if I may, because this morning on Twitter, NAPCE is going to be announcing the finalists in the 2021 National Awards for Pastoral Care and Education. And I know that we have, just looking down the list of people who are here this morning, we have some schools represented who have made nominations. So the award, the announcement is going to go out on Twitter a little bit later on this morning, but I just want to give you a very quick, brief preview and advance information to thank you for coming along and joining us this morning. So the first nominations are for Pastoral School of the Year, which is sponsored by our partners Blue Sky Education. And I'm pleased to announce that the finalists are the Royal School Dungannon in Northern Ireland, Oakfield School in Hull, the Children's Hospital in Leicester, Limavady High School in Northern Ireland, and the School for Inspiring Talents in Newton Abbot in Devon. The Pastoral Team of the Year award is sponsored by the Thrive Approach, who are one of our presenters on the first day of the conference. And the finalists are the Grove Pastoral Team at the Grove School, Wigston School in Leicestershire, Limavady High School, Nidderdale High School, and Buxton Community School. The Pastoral Member of Staff of the Year is sponsored by Inclusion Expert, and this year's finalists are Zoe Knight from Westfield Infant School, Julie McCartney from Limavady High School, Dawn Sabler, a learning mentor at Malton Primary School, Dr. Helen O'Connor from St Swithin School, and Mrs. Shania Fort from Bishop Challoner School. The Pastoral Leader of the Year is sponsored by Taylor and Francis, who published the NAPCE academic journal Pastoral Care and Education. And the finalists this year are Miss Laura Fishy from Limavady High School, Helen Burton from Belmont Community School, Luke Ramsden from St Benedict School in London, Mickey Handerford from the Children's Hospice School in Leicester, and Alison Simpson, Cobden Primary School in Loughborough. The Pastoral Development of the Year is sponsored by good old NAPCE, and the finalists this year are the TRT, Trauma Recovery and Training Student Support and Mentoring Intervention Programme, St Swithin School, Jenny Kay at Nidderdale High School, the Children's Hospital School in Leicestershire, and Buxton and Leek College. The Outstanding Contribution to Pastoral Care again is sponsored by NAPCE, and the finalists this year are Jan Ashton of Nidderdale High School, Sarah Coughlin of Oakfield School in Hull, Claire Gibbs of Ridgeway Secondary School in Redditch, Nicola Wright of Nidderdale High School, and Achieve NI in Belfast, Northern Ireland. The International Contribution to Pastoral Care is sponsored by the Holt International School, and the finalists are Bromsgrove International School in Thailand, Stephanie Herzog of the International School of Zug and Luzerne, sorry for my pronunciation, and Child First Consultancy Limited. And the final award, very special award for raising awareness about pastoral care, sponsored by the Association of School and College Leaders. That is going to be announced on the evening of the presentation event. That presentation event will take place in September 2021. Please follow NAPCE on Twitter for details, or to get all the up-to-date information, register for NAPCE's free monthly newsletter, or to ask about membership of NAPCE and all the benefits that brings by contacting admin@napce.org.uk. Okay, that's all my sort of plugs for the morning. And I think I've just about managed to keep the time, so I'm not doing too bad a job as a chair. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce our first speaker, who has got amazing experience in pastoral care, and is very pleased to have her here this morning to share that expertise. A warm welcome on behalf of NAPCE to Helen Peter. Helen is a teacher, trainer, published writer and author, and inspirational presenter. She's worked in over 400 schools and organisations in all phases, training staff in pastoral care, circle time, and mental and emotional health. She is the author of the book Making the Most of Tutor Time, a whole school practical handbook on emotional literacy and positive behaviour management, designed to promote emotional and social intelligence and positive mental health. The handbook guides tutors and teachers to develop their communication and social skills, to support students to resolve conflict and to build self-esteem, self-awareness and self-management. She is also the co-author of Circles, PSHE and Citizenship for secondary teachers to guide them in setting up a pedagogy for emotional support via circle time. She has 40 years teaching experience and still retains the enthusiasm, energy, and vocation she had at the start of her career. I'm very pleased to welcome to our conference this morning, Helen Peter.
Hello, good morning. This is a new experience for me, talking to myself in an office as opposed to normally presenting to live people in schools or in conference centres. So it's a very strange thing for me. And when I was planning my talk, I said to Phil, you know, who's our audience? And he said, well, it's mostly secondary. So instead of doing interactive things like games and things that you could do with children, which I'd have loved to do, because of the delay on the line, people said, don't do it. Don't tell jokes, don't do anything because you're on your own. So I've done a talk about making better relationships in schools, both primary and secondary, but primarily secondary, really. Sorry, my screen just gone. To enhance relationships and talk about difficult relationships. I thought about heads of pastoral care and pastoral deputies and people sitting in their office trying to listen to this, if they were given any sort of time, with people knocking on the door and being driven mad by all sorts of problems in school. And I believe I read some information once that said that we spend 90% of our time on 1% of the students and their families. We all know how difficult they can be and how much time they can take. So it's all about making positive relations. And as someone said yesterday, pastoral care is at the heart of education. But I don't see any siloing. I don't see any difference between academic and pastoral care. They should be the same as they are in primary, really. Next slide, please. I have to do Chris Whitty. Next slide, please, Phil. Thanks. Thank you. So my aims for today are that we get a whole school understanding, and I'm going to go through relationships with colleagues, difficult colleagues, relationships with difficult individual students and dreadful classes, and yourself. And my hope is that you'll end with at least one refreshed idea to go away with, because when I go on courses, I quite often am reminded of things I used to do or used to know and forgot about. So the other thing is that you will get a free copy of my book. I'm not trying to sell anything, just in case you're thinking of writing a book. You never make any money out of it, at least I don't. So I've got the PDF copy that was sent to me to edit, and I think it was published by Scholastic and they've gone bust. So I'm very happy to give it away to you in PDF form. And the other thing I want to do is make sure that you feel a bit refreshed and energized. I'm sure the football has done something for you, and let's hope Sunday the result goes well, but also that you look after yourself. Next slide, please, Phil. So, as I say, we're going to look at colleagues, parents, individual students, and whole classes and groups. And the question of today is, does every child matter? Well, of course they do. You know, we wouldn't be in education if they didn't. And it's very important that we look at the whole child, which is something that's been a bit lacking, I think, as the inevitable academization of schools goes forth and the sort of pressure on teachers and so on. So here's a few ideas that I've gone through. Next slide, please, Phil. One of the things I've spent a lot of time on is things like neuro-linguistic programming and other CBT and things like that. And one thing that I work with NQT and non-teachers on, and teachers, is that about 50 to 60% of our communication is in our body language and our tone of voice, and very little in the actual words we speak. So I think it's very, very important that you're aware of your body language, aware particularly children, especially sensitized or vulnerable children, are incredibly aware of your tone of voice. And the way that you speak to children, you can say, please sit down, in 50 different ways, and everything will have a little nuance. And body language and facial expression, you just have to raise an eyebrow or do something like that, and it can ring around the room. And I I've worked with many learning support assistants and teaching assistants in the classroom. And one little twitch or of the eyebrow, whatever, it can actually ruin your whole lesson. It's quite interesting. So in general, I would say having positive thoughts is pretty important, really. And so looking after yourself and self-care, which is a big message from the Circle Time training. I used to work with Jenny Mosley, who's big in, or was big in primary, not so much in secondary. So I've worked in both, but I did a lot of work in the Circle Time in secondary. And I used to do demonstration circles in my school in Bristol and all over the place. And it's like magic, it's wonderful. And I did it in lots of countries around the world, and even in Cuba, which was amazing, in Spanish. So I think building positive relationships is a mix of all sorts of interesting things, but being aware of your body, how you look after yourself and your tone of voice is very important, and having enough preparation so that you're confident and prepared. Next slide, please, Phil. And we all know what stresses us in schools at the moment, and with COVID even more, but a lot of it is with systems. You get to print off some work and the printer's not working, or the system's down, or you can't register. And then confrontations with difficult parents and children and staff, very difficult. Keeping up with all the marking, paperwork, emails and phone calls, and having lessons observed. So we know that schools are incredibly emotive, stressful places. And often pastoral staff are the ones who get the bulk of the difficulties, because the academic work runs on, but the pastoral curriculum, children don't behave to a timetable. And so we're nearly always having to be reactive, picking up problems and so on. However good your systems are, you are always chasing yourself. So time is a huge problem. Next slide, please, Phil. And although I think it's incredibly important to be yourself and be congruent, I do think that to some extent we wear something of a mask. And there's a very interesting article in Secondary Ed, I've got a reference here, the 3rd of February 2016, about how with online learning, children have to adopt a sort of mask and become something they're not really, and create on Facebook or TikTok or whatever it is there, on Instagram, this sort of persona that is better than them because they can't show vulnerability. And it's very difficult. And I used to watch the students walking into school, especially young, sort of year 7 or even little year 10. Lots of my students, I always was attracted to the difficult and ones that we failed. And as they got towards school, they'd sort of pull their blazer sleeves up and sort of adopt a kind of snarl. And it was so sad to me that that wasn't really them at all, but they felt they had to do that to protect themselves. And what I'm saying to staff is, to some extent, you have to do the same, because when I first started teaching, I used to teach, I taught English to begin with, and I used to do my favourite poems, and I've soon stopped. You know, like Yeats says, they tread on your dreams. Next slide, please, Phil. And the fairly basic message from relationships in school and teaching is, if I like the teacher, I'll work hard and try, obviously. And that seems to me the most obvious thing, and came from my children. My son had a big run-in with his maths teacher and said she's an old bat and I'm never going to work for her. And I said, well, she gets paid whether you work or not. You know, you're the one that will suffer. I don't care, I hate her and she hates me. So a lot of it is about showing you care and holding back any emotions. Of course, some children chime with us better than others, and some have pains in the neck. But I think you have to show that you like them, but not their behaviour. Next slide, please, Phil. The other thing is that English people in particular, maybe human nature, is that we like moaning about things. And I used to have a bit of paper on my desk with a cross on it. And it wasn't crosses on the board about bad behaviour or anything. It was actually to try and say, look how much space there is there. That's all the good stuff. And yet we always hone in on the bad bit, the cross. And I just think that's quite an important thing to remember, that, you know, those children have turned up, they're mostly in uniform, they've got their stuff, they're willing to, one thing goes wrong and we go on about it. And as a Senko and as head of year and so on, I've bent over backwards for families. I've stayed up at 3 o'clock in the morning writing personal plans. I've taken them home. I've taken them to hospital. I've written letters for them. And then one thing goes wrong, and that's what they remember you for or moan about you. And it's human nature to be negative, but I think it's incredibly important that we're not, and that we're not so self-effacing. Next slide, please. So one of the most important lessons I think I've ever learned, and what I teach non-teaching staff and NQTs and colleagues, is don't do the shortcut and say you are stupid. Say, don't use the word stupid, please. I like you. I didn't like your behaviour. I didn't like the choice you made. And that separation is hugely, hugely important, because otherwise we're just assassinating character. And once you've lost that goodwill, you've had it, really. So I think for good relationships, that's an incredibly important thing, to separate the personality from the behaviour. Just one thing to ask you, if you are participating, to think, what do you think students want? What do they want from you? At this point, if I was on the stage, I'd play a game called Hesitation. And you get a pair of students, and I won't do it with what teachers want. Well, okay, we could. But you have a pair of people, and you clap hands, and then you clap together. And when you clap together, each of you says a word in turn. Of course, we can't do that at the moment with COVID. So if you were doing this for children for a word storm, I'd say things like, what do children want teachers to be? They want them to be kind. They want them to be funny. They want them to listen. They want to be good-tempered. They want to be competent, etc. It's just a quick way of getting some ideas out of people. It's all in the book anyway. And if I ever get to see you in person, you'll have a go at doing it. Next slide, please, Phil. Thank you. So this is what they want. We all know this. They want us to smile. They want us to listen. They want us to organise things. They don't always mean we don't care. Be firm and fair. Fairness is a huge thing. Be human, chat, don't over-organise us, care, and keep stuff private. They hate it when they think you're gossiping about them in the staff room, and absolutely right, they should. Next slide, please, Phil. One thing you can do is to see what your school ethos is just check out how your school reception area feels. You probably going through there every day, so it doesn't mean that much to you. You're used to it. But try and remember when you went for your interview, what did it feel like? Was the person behind the desk a dragon? Did you scare everyone? Were there teachers shouting at children? Was it calm? Was it organised? Was it nice? And businesses spend a lot of money on getting their reception and their beginning, their first contact with people. A lot of money on that. And schools, less so sometimes. Or sometimes there's a lovely reception area and then teachers shouting at the children down the corridor. So I just give you a bit of a challenge here. Next slide, please, Phil. It's a door challenge. I did this with a year group one year for a week. We looked at how many people opened doors or held doors open for each other. Now, of course, in COVID, they might be wedged open, and we looked at how many teachers held doors for teachers, teachers for non-teachers, teachers for students, students for teachers, students for students. And it was a really interesting time to watch and see. It's a very good, quick temperature check on how your school is, how people speak to each other, what the corridor behaviour is, just something really simple and easy. And then we did an assembly about it, and the students ran it. It was fascinating. And after that, everyone held doors open for about a week and then forgot about it. So human nature. Next slide, please. In a class of about 30 people, if you say who's in that group, in general, there'll be 4 big personalities on average, named by everyone. 2 are often actively disliked, sometimes more, and 4 not mentioned. And I think that's really, really important for us as pastoral leaders. The 4 not mentioned, the ones I worry about. The squeaking wheel gets the oil, and in fact, that's probably who I'm talking about today. But 4 not being mentioned, the people who stay under the radar, who never want to be noticed, scuttle around, keeping low. And they might be the young carers, they might be the abused, they might be the ones having a terrible time, but they don't want anyone to know because they're afraid of social services or whatever. And they're the ones we need to be completely up on the radar. And one of the things I used to say to people is try and get someone else to take your class for you for a while. And so you can observe. It's a very different thing being at the side or the back from being in the front. Just try and work out whether there are certain children you never ask to ask questions, or they never put their head above the parapet. Anyway, next slide, please, Phil. I was picking out one of the most important things, and it is that difficult colleagues take a lot of our time and energy. And if you want good relationships in school for learning, it's very important to have respect for them, even if they drive you mad. Of course, we're going to be working with people with completely different philosophies. Let's take Mr. Brown, maths teacher, who loves maths, doesn't seem to like kids very much, can't keep control, and upsets classes all over the place. But he's human. He's got his own views, entitled to it. What we have to do is talk him through the policy of the school, the guidelines of the school, model good behaviour, particularly behaviour management in his case, and then give him some support and training. I think I'm a big fan of Bill Rogers, Australian behaviour guy. He's got lots of free videos online and lots of other things like Ask Bailey and people like that. There's a lot of stuff. And of course, you should be modelling that good behaviour too for him. But nobody wants to have a hard time. The whole purpose is for us to be working in nice places where we're happy. And Mr. Brown deserves to be happy too. And so he needs some support. And it might be that ultimately he might be happier out of teaching or in a private school or somewhere that it's easier. Who knows? But I just think respect for colleagues is absolutely vital, and non-teaching as well. Some schools are very, very hierarchical places, and there's a lot going on, and we need to treat everyone well. Next slide, please, Phil. The other thing I'd say to you as pastoral leads is don't charge into the rescue. One of the things I think nearly all of us have a tendency to do, particularly if we've been around a bit and we get on very well with the children and we don't have any behaviour problems and they look up to us, is that we can rush in there and say, I'll sort this out. And our aim is to enable students to cope and know that they matter and be independent, but it's also that for staff. So I think we should listen and support, but enable them to manage situations alone. Same with children. We have to model good practice, control your own emotions. Some colleagues drive you mad, and listen more than you speak. And I chose the Lone Ranger here because he's wearing a mask. Next slide, please, Phil. So one of the things I've trialed, and there's a real good hint for people in school, secondary and primary, is if you see a staff member having problems with a child, don't rush in and say, I'll deal with this. Stand by them. So all you have to do is stand next to them and observe what they're doing. So once you're there and you're standing there, you listen to what they're saying. You try and stay silent unless you're absolutely innocent. If they're really bawling the child out or being terrible, then you can butt in. But you show solidarity without overtaking. We've all been in lessons with 8B or some awful unteachable class. And when you walk in, they're all really good and silent. But the minute you walk out, they're bad again. So you're not really helping Mr. Brown at all. So by standing by him, not only will that moderate his behaviour and his language, we hope, but it will show the child that you're there. The only thing is it has to be a policy, because I did it standing next to a member of staff once, and they looked around in the middle of talking to this child and said, what do you want? So it kind of slightly backfired. Anyway, next one, please, Phil. The other thing that I've picked out as a point to as a hint is planning for extra adults in the class. We all know that some TAs or LSAs can be quite difficult to manage. Sometimes they talk when you're talking. Sometimes they either do the work wrong or whatever. And it seems to me, I used to run a team of advisory teachers in Waltham Forest 20 odd years ago. And we had a pro forma to fill in together. And the I would go in and teach the class or hold the class. The teacher would sit with the TA and go through this pro forma. So they're still in the class, and they'd just quietly go through it, saying, who are you here to support? Where do I want you to sit? Do you want to sit next to someone? Do you want me to Velcro myself to them? Do you want me to scribe? Do you want me to simplify? What's the work? Do you understand it? When is it available? And what outcomes do you want as a teacher? And it seems very obvious to me. I mean, there are pro formas and things now, but I could count on the fingers of one hand how many TAs and teachers have gone through it together. And it does actually mean that relationships with the extra adults in the classroom are much better. Next slide, please, Phil. So I'm a great believer in pro formas to fill in and photos. And for you in COVID, where you've hardly seen any children this year or seen them a few times, having photos, depending on your school policy, and having pro formas about them is really useful, because you've got their writing, their help. If they can't write, have a scribe. I can't tell you how many children with learning difficulties and parents as well, who the school used to give them a bit of paper and say, write down what happened. Well, they can't do it. They just write, he hit him, something. If you actually talk it through with someone or use technology like Dragon or something so they can actually get something down, it's a really useful thing. Okay, I'm rushing on here. Next slide, please, Phil. But when you have got a bad class, the dreaded 8B, I've got a teacher up in Leeds who's got a panic button for 8B. They're pretty awful. It's really bad to give a dog a bad name because it sticks. So once a class gets a reputation like that, and teachers actually say, you're awful, I can't teach you, well, guess what happens? They get worse. And one of the benefits that came up yesterday was that lots of children are actually really happy to be in school and learning, hooray. But we still have to deal with 8B. And one of the hints I'd say for that is not only use all the usual tactics and support Mr. B, but if no children are learning any maths in Mr. B's class, you could steal time from the curriculum. So you could go in and take the class. Don't have Mr. B there the first time. I would personally run a circle time with them, and I'd sit around and I'd say, look, what's going wrong here? And I've had magic lessons where children are completely honest to say, look, I'm messing around. I don't listen. I don't do work. And then we come up with solutions. Okay, Arlene is going to sit with Rakesh and he will do the work. And if he doesn't, we're all going to make a signal to him. And you work like that. You work with Mr. Brown and his behaviour. I do 2 or 3 sessions, and I think, well, it usually worked. They usually settle down because we had good targets and good rewards. Okay, next one, please. So, as I say, I do a lot of circle time, and it can be in a classroom. You can see the one on the right, we're all squashed up a bit. It can be done. Or in the other one is a drama studio. And I could give you a whole load of training on circle time. It's a wonderful thing for teaching PSHE too. Not for everything, but it's really useful. And I'd love to do a session on that. Next one, please, Phil. In my book, there's also a section on the self-managing tutor set, because to try and get all that admin done is very important. And it doesn't matter if it's a class or a tutor set, where you choose tasks like checking uniform or helping with homework or doing the tutor set board, or even planning an assembly or work experience support, and you work together. And a lot of my work has been in vertical family type tutor sets, but I realise with bubbles that's gone out the window at the moment. But there's a whole chapter on that. I haven't got much time for it now, but it's a really useful thing to do, to be slick and quick with your pastoral care, to give you more time to listen to the children and help them. Next slide, please, Phil. The other thing we know is support for families, and what's been really good about COVID is the increased contact with them. That came up yesterday. And the fact that really your first contact with families should be positive, because they're used to people phoning up because Kevin suddenly got 6 mobile phones. What's he done now? If you phone up and say, I'm teaching Kevin this year, or I'm Kevin's tutor, I'm really looking forward to working with him, you have a slightly different relationship with that family. And support for helping them get things like free school meals. Don't say you'll do it yourself. Don't get on your white charger. I'm a great believer in having a scribe for people. quite often parents say, oh, I haven't got my glasses. That's fine. Just say, it's okay, I'll make some notes. It's an excuse for poor literacy often. Just support them. Show you like the child, be welcoming, don't judge, and agree a common purpose, which is actually their learning and happiness. Make sure you get their names right. The next slide, please, Phil, is just the last bit, is that you matter. So many teachers burn out. And I'm very, very sad to say that Mr. Drew, who I think was in Educating Essex and so on, they've burnt out. And it's so important that you look after yourself. And, you know, yesterday and the day before on the conference, people were saying, you know, do this, do that. Yeah. Actually, you have to have boundaries and you have to forgive yourself and say, right, that's enough. And one of the problems with teaching is that it's never quite right, never perfect. And I spent hours and hours and hours on lesson plans and marking and so on and so forth. Sometimes you just have to stop. You have to go for a run. You have to phone a friend to have a laugh. You have to have some escape and family time. You have to give some treats. And you have to have guilt-free pampering. And boy, do you need it. I know some of you are desperate for the holidays and you deserve it. So please look after yourselves. Next slide, please, Phil. So I'm just going to read you this because it's quite important. Imagine life as a game in which you're juggling 5 balls in the air. You name them: work, family, health, friends, spirit, and you're keeping all of them up in the air. But you'll soon understand that work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it'll bounce back. But the other 4 balls, family, health, friends, and spirit, they're made of glass. If you drop one of these, they'll be irrevocably scuffed, marked, nicked, damaged, or even shattered. They'll never be the same. You must understand that and strive for balance in your life. And I can't stress that enough. You know, I've worked in schools and I think I've made a huge difference and so on. And they go, oh, I miss you, I miss you. No. 2 weeks later, they've forgotten me because the thing rolls on. You know, we're not indispensable. And I think that's a hugely, hugely important message to all of you. Next slide, please, Phil. So I'm sorry that I've gone so fast, but I hope today that you've picked up a bit about how to have good relationships with individual students, classes, college, and yourself, that you end up with at least one idea and that you can get more from the book, which is free, and that you feel okay to look after yourself first. Next slide, please, Phil. So to summarize quickly, stand by the reception and try the door challenge. Look out for the quietest students. Stand by colleagues, don't jump in. Make working agreements with extra adults in the classroom. Use proformas to fill in, to summarize and memorize things about children and families. Scribe for people that need support. Make sure you put scribed by there. Try self-managing for groups and look after yourself first. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind tour. Next slide, please, Phil. Well, here's a prayer. Well, so far today, I've done all right. I haven't gossiped, I haven't lost my temper, I haven't criticised or moaned. I haven't been snappy, grumpy, nasty, selfish, or overindulgent, and I'm very thankful for that. But in a few minutes, Lord, I'm going to get out of bed, and from then on, I'm probably going to need a lot more help. Sorry, it's my timer. And the last slide, please, Phil. And I'd just say to you, sorry. Oh. Don't give up. If you ever think you're too small to make a difference, try spending the night in a room with a mosquito. Last slide, please, Phil. So if you want a free copy of the book, just email me to download it, and I hope you find it useful. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That's been a really interesting thought. Thank you so much. You shared what is very extensive and very great knowledge in pastoral care, and you certainly encouraged us all to, and everybody present this morning, and everybody watching on Catch Up, of course, to reflect on our pastoral roles and the challenges that we face, and how we, through our approach to it, can actually be more successful. I certainly found it very interesting, the comments about the reception, because that is something which is very easy to get right in many ways, but it's also very, very easy to get wrong. And it, as you said quite rightly, it gives an absolute message about the ethos and what's important in the school. One of the things I did when I was working in schools is I trained a group of researchers, young people who are in year 8, so 12, 13-year-olds, and they went into tutor groups and they were trained to observe and see what they noticed. And one of the things that they said was they couldn't believe how hard the teachers worked, which was very reassuring for the teachers. But they also said that the way the tutor first greeted the children in the morning made a huge difference to how the children felt about learning for the rest of the day. And I think that really reinforces what you were saying. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Gauge what other people think about the school, because we know what we think. I don't think we ask other people enough. Sorry, Phil, you back?
Yep, I'm back. Yeah, sorry, I don't know. It's rural Worcestershire. The elastic band doesn't work that quick sometimes. The comment in the chat from Jane, thank you. Absolutely brilliant. Just what I need at the moment. Lots to think about as I start planning return for September for staff and students. Thank you, Jane, for that comment. A question from me. I think we've got just a couple of minutes. Is and it came up a few times in the other presentations in the conference. How important is empathy for adults working in schools, especially in the sort of post-pandemic world that we're going to live in?
Well, it's hugely important. I mean, it's hugely important in life, isn't it? If you want people to be happy, you've got to try and understand them. And most people want to be understood and listened to. And if you don't have any sort of empathy and ability to stand in other people's shoes, then you can never actually feel what other people feel, but at least you can make an effort. And we know by people on the autistic spectrum how difficult it is when you can't do that. And you just become your own world. And the same with narcissists too. Empathy is hugely important. And when you see people like Miss Trunchbull, there are a few left, you realise how important empathy is.
Thank you, Helen. You did a brilliant job with your time, and much better than me as chair sometimes when I'm trying to keep people to time. And thank you very much for continuing to talk when I suddenly froze. That was
no problem.
Brilliant as well. Thank you very much. Going to move on to our second presenter, and hopefully, Maria, the technology means I've now made you presenter. So it really is a great pleasure to welcome Maria O'Neill this morning to the conference. Maria is going to use the ideas and research from a book which was published in April 2021, so very recently. If you've not read it yet, get on Amazon. It's a really good book. Lots of really interesting, nice ideas. She's going to talk about how her book, Proactive Pastoral Care, Nurturing Happy, Healthy and Successful Learners, can help people working in pastoral roles to be successful in schools. The presentation will explain why there is a need for a proactive approach to pastoral care in schools. It will explore how pastoral care in schools can empower students to make healthy life choices, take care of their well-being and reach their full potential in school and beyond. It's going to share essential information to enable teachers and leaders in schools to enhance their pastoral support, to boost student progress and personal development. It will share practical research-based strategies and activities perfect for tutor time, assemblies and PSHE lessons. What more could you want? And if you do want more after the presentation, go and look at the book. Maria is an experienced pastoral leader. It's been my pleasure to work with NAPCE and Maria over the last few years. I really look forward to us being able to work together in the same room live. But at the moment, this is what we have to get used to. She's a researcher. She's an advanced skills teacher. She is a founder of Pastoral Support UK and currently works in a pastoral role, pastoral leader in a school, as well as various key roles to support sustainable pastoral training and raise the profile of pastoral leadership nationwide. I also know that she has recently been successful in achieving her first deputy headship, so congratulations on that. And Maria, welcome to the conference.
Thank you very much. That's a great introduction, Phil. I hope I'm not going to disappoint you all. So, I'm just going to share my PowerPoint with you. Can you see it? Let me just start again. Hang on. Okay, right. So, because I've just lost it for a second. Okay, so you should be able to see it. So hopefully you can, because I can't see you now. I'm just going to see the presentation. But please do feel free to interrupt me and to ask any questions as I go along. And now I've only got half an hour, so I'm trying to fit in quite a lot in this half an hour. So, as Phil said, I'm wearing quite a few different hats. I've approached pastoral care as a mother of two, as a researcher. I'm just finishing my PhD. As a pastoral leader, it hasn't always been the case. I used to be the academic leader up to 2015. And then change in my circumstances meant that I chose the pastoral route. And since then, I've been working in pastoral care as an NSPCC counsellor, as a pastoral leader in the secondary school. I now have got my deputy headship as a deputy head wellbeing. So it all came together for me in the last few years. Pastoral care is something that's really, really personal to me. And I mentioned I have got two children. If you haven't heard me speak, this is a bit of a backstory to why I'm doing all of that. My son became suicidal a few years back, and just to cut a long story short, I ended up phoning the GP and they told me, look, there is nothing we can do. If he gets any worse, just phone the ambulance and the police. And at that moment, I'm thinking there is something that we can do to get the situation from, escalating all the time, to just sort of preventing something from happening. Because when I found myself in that position, there was no way forward. So that's why I focused on proactive pastoral care, and I focused on preventative care rather than the safeguarding and the child protection, which can also be proactive, but that's sort of the point where things happened already. So this is why it's very important to me from the personal point of view. I will be referring to my book. It's not a sales speech, I promise. It's just I put all my research, all my knowledge, everything, all my experience into this book. So I will be referring to it from time to time. Okay, so what I'm trying to accomplish in this session is to look at proactive pastoral care and how it is different from reactive pastoral care. You as a leader, because we have got to be authentic in our leadership and we have got to act in alignment with our values. Otherwise, the children are just getting the tick box exercise of well-being and pastoral care. And looking at the pastoral structures, again, that's not a, it's not a simple solution, but we need to start thinking about what actually our pastoral structures allow us to do. And measuring the impact, that has been a big question for a number of years. Do we measure happiness? Do we measure well-being? What do we do with that? Actually, how can we measure pastoral care? And I actually rejected one of the jobs that I went for. I withdrew from the interview process because the incoming head teacher kept on asking me about data and measuring pastoral care. So I thought that is not in alignment with my values. And the way forward, what are we going to achieve? Or what are we hoping to achieve? So let me get to the first one. I define proactive pastoral care is the essential element of pastoral structures, and I'm connecting that proactive pastoral care proactivity with the community's well-being structure. And when I'm talking about the well-being, I'm not talking about the tick box exercise. I'm talking about the school's vision, the school's ethos, the school's values. What actually are we doing? And we are starting with staff. We are looking at the well-being for staff as well as for students. So this is just what I came up with through my research, and I looked really, you know, centuries back. I looked at the Greek philosophers and Chinese philosophers, because at the moment, well-being is such a buzzword, and no one really knows what it is. But people use, as I said, I keep on saying that, tick box exercise to address the well-being, which is completely the wrong way around it. So I looked back as far as I could, just to bring that substance and focus and meaning to the word well-being. I do go through the research in my book, and I do introduce different well-being models and structures. But again, I don't have time for this. If you're interested, please do have a look. So then I went back to 1974, and Michael Marland defined the pastoral care. You will be surprised the way that he defined the pastoral care. I'm not going to read that for you. I'm going to let you read this. So for me, this is very much proactive pastoral care. This is not the safeguarding and child protection, the reactive care that we are accustomed to because of the accountability. And, you know, rightly so, we have got to ensure that safeguarding is of the highest possible standard. But we also need to do something more. Otherwise, we are in the vicious circle of just being on our knees, dealing with the safeguarding issues and not moving forward in a sustainable way and preventative way. So back in 1974, and still we are here talking about it. I don't think the last 50 years, I think we are on the move, and I think that COVID has helped us to get going again, but we should have achieved much more in those 50 years. Now, the way I look at the pastoral structures, again, I look at the top, middle, and bottom level. And the tutors, the bottom level, actually the most important people, because everything comes to them. If you see the errors going up, this is the reactive structure. So something happened, the tutor reacts, passes it on to the head of year or someone like pastoral manager. And then if the pastoral manager and the head of year consider it to be very serious, then it goes to the top level, assistant heads, deputies heads, and then it goes to the inclusion or whatever it is, exclusion or whatever it is the consequence is. So this is a very reactive type of approach. The errors going down is my way of introducing the proactive approach, because actually there should be someone like a well-being mental health person at the top who can teach and empower all the leaders at all the different levels about well-being, about preventative care, about ACEs, about I don't know, trauma. Everybody has been through the trauma, and the number of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, has increased because we have just been through the pandemic. And to be honest, we don't know what we are dealing with. Have we assessed how the families has been affected? It's difficult to do so because every single family has been affected in a different way, in their own unique way. So for me, that error going down is the preventative, that's the knowledge error. So you have got, for example, the deputy head empowering the middle leaders, pastoral managers, head of year, who then empower the tutors to deal with the situations, to give the knowledge, to give the right support to their tutees. And, you know, this is sort of representative of my philosophy that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. And in order to be proactive, we have got to have the knowledge, we have got to have the strategies. And very often, initial teacher training does not provide that knowledge because it does focus just on academics. And the pastoral is sort of brushed to the side, and then you being thrown with your first tutor group, loads of pastoral issues, and it's like, what do I do now? So this is just something that I think is very important to bear in mind. The arrow is not just going up, but going down, and that empowerment that is very important for the safeguarding. Now, there are different well-being models. I have introduced my own, and I have introduced it as a garden because it really represents that cultivating the well-being from the inside. For me, that's very important. So I have got 4 different trees. You have got family and social relations, spiritual and moral goodness, emotions and mood, physical and mental health. So I have got in my structure, I have got 4 different trees, and they're all different trees because they're different parts of the well-being. And I have got the tools there as the gardener as well. We have got to use different tools and different strategies to cultivate different types of well-being and making sure that our well-being trees are flourishing. The reason why I'm talking about this structure is because we will come back to that as well towards the end when we'll be talking about assessing well-being. So something to bear in mind for now. Emotions and mood is probably one of the major things that we will need to address once we're back in September. And that emotional regulation is very important. Just to give you a flavor of some of the activities that I will be doing with my children and staff. And, you know, these are all covered in my book as well, and many more. But I do like this one, okay? So I would ask you to think of your favorite cake. Don't overthink it, just any cake that comes to mind. Any cake that comes to mind. So once I've asked my children and my staff to do that, I put a picture. We are all unique. We all have got different preferences. We all will think of different cakes. And that's why we interpret emotions in our different ways. Sadness for someone will be different to what it is for me. Bereavement, again, will be different because we are unique and we process our feelings and emotions uniquely. So this is just a great example of how we can focus on emotions. You know, someone clever said once, everybody knows what emotions are until you ask them to define what they are, and no one knows then. So this is just a visual explanation. And the reason why, I mean, some people use cats, dogs, and flowers, you know, any collective nouns that can mean different things. I like the food because I'm talking then about digesting our emotions and not bottling them up. So for me, that cake does, you know, example, does work. And also I talk about a plate of different cakes because when we express or when we experience emotions, it's never one emotion. We can experience a number of emotions, and that's why children and adults find it hard to explain what exactly they are feeling because sometimes you can't even work out what you're feeling. So instead of asking the children how are you feeling, the best way to go around it is to say what has happened to you, and that gets them to explain and describe the situation rather than the emotion, so then you can work out and get to the bottom of what they're feeling right now. So a mix of emotions, and you know, some people feel, and pupils come to me and says, I feel really, I don't know, I just don't know what I feel. And so that's fine. You can feel different emotions at the same time, even contradicting emotions. You know, I'm at the stage where I've got an exciting new chapter in my life, but I still feel sad that the 13 years in my previous school have ended. You know, so I feel a mixture of happiness, excitement, and a bit of sadness at the same time. And that's absolutely fine. We are complex human beings. It's fine to feel a mix of emotions. I also talk about the language that we use to describe emotions. So is it okay to use words like, well, right, wrong? Well, it's reasonable, unreasonable. I mean, who are we to judge? And the main takeaway for my children is to don't judge another person. You can't judge the way they process emotions, because actually every single emotion is valid. And if we say they're not, then that's where stigma begins. Whatever you're feeling is valid. And there are no right or wrong answers, and there is no right or wrong way to experience bereavement, happiness, sadness, whatever it is. We're all unique, and we have got to appreciate every single person and what they're going through without trying to fix it for them, because, you know, then you're going into that triangle, I'm a victim, please help me, and the person who is actually saving the victim, the savior, is as bad as the prosecutor, because they're not empowering the person to go through the things that they're going through. They're fixing it for them, which is not the right thing to do. So again, the reason why I'm focusing on emotions is because it's vital these days during the COVID pandemic. And that's the last bit, I promise, before I go to the next part. So you've got loads of different things to consider when you're talking about well-being, and cultural backgrounds is one of them, because for different cultures, for different people from different backgrounds, well-being will mean different things. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is, I like this, fine. Are you fine? And I ask this question quite a lot. Are you fine, or you F-I-N-E? And my children know what I mean. And if they're not ready to express those feelings because they haven't worked out what they're feeling, that's absolutely fine. I'll give them time, but at least they know that I've noticed that they're not okay. And that sometimes can be even more powerful than a conversation when they're not ready. I have already mentioned the third point about reasonable and unreasonable. And the last point connects to what I said before, you know, the question about what has happened to you rather than, oh, what are you feeling? What's wrong? Because we have got a number of different emotions which are negative. Actually, there are many more words for negative emotions than positive emotions. And if you are interested, again, in my book, I talk about the healthy negative emotions and unhealthy negative emotions, because actually bereavement is a healthy negative emotion. We are feeling sad, but it's something that we have got to go through. It's something that's going to change us as a person and make us more resilient. So again, that's a really interesting debate, looking at the healthy negative and unhealthy negative emotions. But we haven't got time to go into the detail today. So there is a wonderful questionnaire, and I believe wholeheartedly in authentic leadership. Phil, you don't know that, but actually when I went for the job, and, you know, I have talked to many people, you know, how do I know whether it's the right job or not? And I was talking to someone called Russell Spears. He's the CEO of RS Academics, the recruitment consultancy agency. And he said, look, going for jobs is like going on dating. You know, you have got to find that one. And for me, finding that one meant that I have got to be authentic in the way that I lead. So, you know, at the end of the interview, when people ask you, so have you got any questions? Normally, I'm scared to ask anything, because, oh, have I missed something on the website that they've mentioned? Am I going to look silly by asking something that I should know already? So I have come up with this question, which is, if I were lucky to be appointed, what advice would you give me? And the governor who was interviewing me said, don't change. And for me, that was it. Okay, I'm allowed to be me. I'm allowed to be authentic. That basically was the sign that that's the one. I found my one fantastic job. So I'm not going to ask you to go through the questionnaire with me. Obviously, the PowerPoint, I think, will be available. But I just wanted to go through this, because that's a really great questionnaire, and the way it evaluates that authenticity is through looking at self-awareness, looking at your moral perspective, balanced processing, so that's your decision making. So how do you come up with the decision? Is it a critical decision making, or are you just being influenced by some external factors? And relational transparency, I mean, that is for me a very important part. So this is for me, you know, the relations, the transparency are the two values which are close to my heart, and I believe that relations do underpin everything. And you know, there is that quote, I can't remember who said it, but you don't leave a job, you leave your boss. So for me, that relational aspect is very important. So this is the questionnaire. You can do it in your own time. I now only got half an hour, so I don't want to spend 10 minutes of that going through this, but I would really recommend doing that on your own. Don't overthink it. Go through, you know, for your instinct. See what you can do. Then these are the instructions. You can add up the score and see what you have got for all of those different parts of authenticity, and authentic leadership will be the overall, the total of all your scores. And this is the explanation. If you wanted to look into that a little bit more, here is the person who wrote this book. And this is where you can find the questionnaire and a little bit more about it. Again, I do apologize, I haven't got time to get into the detail of that. So, the reason why I'm talking about authenticity is because it's, well, part of the proactive pastoral care. If the leaders can't be authentic in the way that they behave, in the way that they act, they will struggle to embrace that proactive pastoral care. And you know, authenticity is the fundamental aspect of well-being. It's not just the part of it, it's the foundation of the well-being. Why is it the foundation? Because actually the lack of authenticity, as you can see on this slide, leads to emotional disorders and mental disorders. So it is really important to create conditions for staff when they can be authentic, because in return, they will create conditions for students to empower them to be authentic and valued in the way that they are. Now, measuring the impact has been, as I said, one of the things that I have been focusing for a very long time. And for me, the questions are, well, actually, is it necessary to measure the impact? Why are we measuring it? Is it just for some sort of compliance? Is it some sort of accountability? Or are we really interested to measure the impact to see how we're doing? What are we measuring and why? That's another important question, and I'll explain in a second why it is so important. And what are we going to do with the data? Is it going to be stored in some of our bureaucratical files? Are we actually going to deal with that data? And what type of data? Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it just a questionnaire? Or is it actually, you know, qualitative research where we are really interested in each individual and their unique situations? What are we going to do with the data? Recently, there have appeared quite a lot of various assessment tools. Some of them are on there. I go into much more detail in my book, and I do evaluate them critically. For me, yes, some of them are real and some of them are very useful. They do cost, some of them, quite a lot of money, so they're not affordable. And also there are quite a lot of entrepreneurial organizations that say, we will measure your mental health and well-being. Really? You know, we know that mental health is part of the well-being, so how are you going to measure mental health and well-being? To me, that doesn't make sense, and that shows the lack of understanding of what mental health and well-being are. Just people trying to pack all the buzzwords into the titles. But is there any substance? I don't know. I'm doubtful personally, but I will let everybody decide for themselves. For me, measuring some of the things will be, or intervention will be quite possible. And let me go back. I do apologize for that. I should have copied the slide, but let me go back to my well-being model. If you were to say, we go in to measure well-being, well, actually, you probably will need about 1,000 questions that no one is going to answer because it's such a vast area. So breaking it down into different areas like family and social relations, spiritual and moral goodness, emotions and mood, physical and mental health, actually will help you to focus. What exactly are you measuring? So for example, if we are measuring family and social relations, well, that can be engagement with the family, or it could be bullying instances. And I don't know if you heard of the Girls on Board intervention. I introduced it because we were, well, our heads of year were just dealing with loads of friendship issues and they were not solved at all. So they were just going in circle, looking at the friendship issues time and time again. So for me, introducing Girls on Board, which is an empowerment model, which enables girls to deal with their problems, having the knowledge of how to do it without involving adults who actually can make things worse. I remember one of the parents told, and my daughter was in a primary school at the time, my daughter is not allowed to go to your daughter's birthday because you invited someone else who they fell out with. I'm thinking, what? Why are parents interfering? But the Girls on Board make sure that the girls are empowered to sort out their friendship issues themselves. So actually, I did measure that intervention, and the number of friendship issues has increased based on the training that we have and the Girls on Board intervention that we have introduced. So for us, that worked. Just looking at about emotions and mood, you can look at how many pupils are suffering from anxiety. And as I said, I always keep on going back to that. You must teach from the positive angle. Let's aim. What does it mean to be fulfilled? What does it mean to be in control of our emotions? We need to strive for the positives, for the best. However, when you measure, it's easier to measure the negatives. So because you can't really measure fulfillment, what on earth is that? And for every single person it will be individual, but you can work out how many pupils had anxiety or were absent due to mental health problems or due to eating disorders or whatever it is. So you get my message there. Teach from positive point of view, measure from the negative. But let me get back to my last slide, and now I'm running out of time, so I promise, Phil, it's just the last bit. I wanted to introduce that because I find that really important. So this is just the parental engagement model. C stands for connect. So we can measure how many parents we have recruited and how many parents enrolled in a particular pastoral event. We can do that. We can also measure attendance. So how many parents have actually attended physically that event or virtually? We can measure that. So C and A, we can measure. However, the last two, we cannot really measure. And if we try to measure that, the data can be quite skewed, because actually how many parents will take the phone of their children at 10 o'clock? We don't know. Only maybe the child knows, but they might not tell the truth. The parents might not tell the truth because they want to be good parents. So there is that difference between engagement and involvement. And if we can measure engagement, the attendance, the interest in the pastoral events that are happening, we can't really measure the involvement of parents, which is what's happening privately in their homes. So that shows, I think, that's a great example of what we can and can do in terms of measuring pastoral care. Okay, right. So I think I managed to stick to time. I do apologize if I overran slightly, but I am open to any questions that you might have. And thank you again, Phil, for having me.
Thank you, Maria, and you did a great job at keeping to time. I didn't have to intervene as chair at all, so thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences, and it's very clear how your values and your beliefs drive you on in your work every day. You've clearly got great passion for pastoral care, which is inspirational, and I'm sure that's true for everybody that's listened this morning. I love the way you started with your role as a mother, and I think it's very important that that we all remember, whatever our role is, that we are human beings, and the people that we're working with are human beings as well. So that I think was a very powerful message right at the start of your presentation. It was very interesting, the points you made that were made by Michael Marland, and clearly, even back in 1974, he was making a case for a proactive approach to pastoral care. And that will be very important to members of NAPCE, because Michael was one of the founder members of NAPCE. And I did actually sit next to him in a NAPCE meeting, and I was his partner for a NAPCE meeting. So it's really good to see that the impact he made then, back in 1974, is still being continued today. So that's brilliant. Getting some positive comments coming through in the chat. I've got one question which I think is interesting, following up from the presentation. You talked about well-being, and the question is, how can schools support well-being of staff without it just being a token gesture?
It goes back to the culture of the school, to the values. The values have got to be, lived, and it's very easy to establish once you go to school. And I have been in a few schools lately, which ones really live their values and which ones have got them laminated somewhere. So it is, I always talk about the garden because I love gardening and I love nature, and it's part of the well-being. But you see, when you plant something, you have got to prepare the soil, you have got to have the right compost, the right, fertilizer, whatever it is, you have got to prepare the soil. And some schools which haven't got the right culture or ethos, they've got concrete instead of soil. So no matter what you do in terms of well-being, it's going to be a battle. So you need to start with the basics, with the school culture, with the ethos, with getting the education to staff. So all of that needs to be there. We need to agree what well-being is and what it isn't as a school community for that consistency, because everybody, again, will have different definitions of what well-being is. So making sure that everything is there, the foundations are there, the soil is there.
Thank you very much, Maria. And Maria is very modest. She's not plugging her book, but if you've not read it yet, please do. It's an excellent book, and certainly something which should be on the reading list. In fact, every time I talk to Maria, I end up having to buy another book, and that's probably going to be true today as well. So, but hopefully this time we'll get time to read them. It was very interesting, the comment about having gone through the pandemic, that we don't really know what we're going to have to deal with in pastoral roles in schools in the future. And that was something which came out of the question time last night, and also came out of the first day of the conference. And I think that is so true, that one of the great challenges for pastoral staff is that we have to draw on all our expertise and all our skills, because we never really know what we're going to face. And that's probably never been more true than what's going to happen in September. And that is probably the best link I can make to my own presentation, because I've now got the unenviable task of following two really inspirational presentations from Helen and from Maria. I've got the even more difficult task now of actually introducing myself, which I don't think I've ever done before, but I'll do my best. So I've been an active member of NAPCE both regionally and nationally since it's my first year in teaching, which, even though it's hard to believe, was back in 1982. I know I look much younger, really. I'm the current chairperson of the National Executive Committee for NAPCE and a member of the editorial board for the journal. I've written articles for publication on pastoral issues, and I'm also a peer reviewer for the journal. Some of my recent publications include guidance on effective pastoral support and developing social and emotional skills. I retired from leadership roles in schools in 2017. It doesn't actually feel like I've retired because I seem to be busier than ever. But I now work as an educational consultant supporting schools with developing pastoral support systems, leadership and school improvement. My experience of leadership is secondary school, and it includes roles as deputy head teacher, pastoral deputy head teacher, curriculum and head teacher. I've also got experience of supporting schools as a specialist leader of education, specialising in pastoral care, behaviour and improving attendance. And I'm an educational performance coach and an experienced trainer, and I've been a governor in both primary, secondary schools for over 30 years, and I'm currently the chair of a middle school governing body, which is another interesting challenge. I'm very much going to look in the presentation, picking up this idea of how can we use that experience of what we've been through in the pandemic to move forward in the work that we do in pastoral care. So this is what I'm looking to think about in the presentation. Really, how do we engage learners? And I think it links really well with Maria's presentation, this idea that we really don't know. We know some of the things we're going to face, but we really don't know what it's going to be like, not just in September, but in the future. And again, really linking with both Helen and Maria's presentation, the idea of developing a positive culture in schools and developing appropriate strategies, which really are about every child matters. It's very clear that the pandemic has had a negative impact, both on learning, because young people, as it's highlighted in the press every day, have missed out on learning, but they've also missed out on their personal development as well by not being able to interact with other young people. What I think it has done, though, is it's actually highlighted some of the challenges that the educational system has with some of the structures and the ways that learning is organised. And I think even though perhaps policymakers haven't caught up with this yet, I think educational thinkers are beginning to think, actually, what we're doing needs to change. There needs to be new ways of giving young people experiences in schools. And that educational thinkers are talking about a rethink, a restart, a new approach, which means that we're looking at how we can make learning and education more relevant to young people in the 21st century for the world that they're going to live in. So different ways that we can engage learners. It has to be relevant to them. It has to have a purpose. It has to be relevant for preparing them to live in their world, not our world. We said in the question time last night that the experience of people who were present when they were at school is very different to young people's experience who are going to school today. It needs to be something that will help them in their future. It's going to be relevant to them. That it's going to develop their skills, their understanding, their attitudes, not just to be successful in the workplace, but actually to be positive members of society. Now, being a little bit perhaps controversial, I think that some of the current pastoral structures and systems are perhaps not fit for purpose, that what they actually do is they encourage learners to be compliant. They, again, prepare young people for passing examinations and achieving good outcomes. That they do, quite rightly, teach young people the values of society, such as respect for other people. That's important. They do support the socialization process, and I think that's been highlighted even more through the pandemic. People have realized, as people said on the panel last night, that schools are at the heart of what happens in society, what happens in all our communities. But the current systems, with a focus on rules and at times sort of sanctions, values conformity. It encourages young people to, through our pastoral work in schools, to conform. And my question is that the sort of young people that the modern world requires? So a fundamental question, I think, which I'd like to put out for people to think about today, is education something that is done to children and young people, or is it something for children and young people? And I think there's a big difference between the two, and it says a lot about what should drive our approaches and our work with young people. And the purpose of education needs to be relevant to the people who are experiencing that education. It's not just about making them behave well and conform, because when they go out into the world of work and the world that they're going to work in, what the world requires is people to think more than just conforming. It needs people that are going to ask questions, that are going to challenge ideas. In a rapidly changing technological world, which is a very global world where we can very quickly communicate with people all around the world, we need to prepare young people for that. We need to prepare them to be successful in that modern technological world, not the world that we experienced when we were at schools. And that raises the question that what sort of pastoral systems and structures are going to be relevant for meeting the needs of young people in that world. So let me go on and explore that a little bit more. So what I believe we're looking for and what we need from our pastoral systems and structures is an approach which encourages young people to actually question ideas and challenge views and opinions. I've been lucky as a consultant to go into classrooms and to watch lessons, and I can sometimes sense the frustration of teachers that, of pupils, that they ask a question and the teacher says, oh yeah, we'll come back to that later on, and move quickly onto something else. Whereas what we should be doing, in my view, is we should be encouraging young people to question, asking the difficult questions, to see about whether there is a different way of looking at something, because in reality, that's what they're going to have to do in their world when they go to work and when they live in our communities and society. And it's about a lot of speakers and contributors to the conference have talked about the importance of relationships, but those positive relationships are going to make different demands and more challenging demands on young people. They're going to need to work with different people in different situations. In the modern workplace, people often move quickly from one team to another, depending upon the expertise and the skills that that team needs. And they need that sort of flexible approach to be able to do that. At the very heart of it, and this has come out very strongly from the conference, is that we need to have empathy for other people. We need to not feel sorry for them. It's not about sympathy. It's still about having high expectations and high demands from other people, but it's about understanding things from their perspective, from their position. So the need for a rethink in education is, in my view, because we need to have an educational system, and we break that down to pastoral. We need to have pastoral systems and structures that are relevant for the needs of young people in their world, and what is going to help them to be successful and prepare them for their future lives. Without any doubt, COVID-19 has had an impact on young people and children. And without any doubt, as this report from Young Minds in 2020 and has really come out again this morning, we do not yet know what the extent of that impact is going to be. And it's clear that it isn't going to be a short-term impact. It's something that we are going to have to work with as pastoral leaders, as pastoral people in pastoral roles for some time to come. And it's most important that we have opportunities like today to share good practice and to share ideas, and perhaps to share our worries as well and our concerns, to look after our well-being through what is going to be probably quite a challenging period. From my visits going into schools, I've been told different ways that the experience of the last 18 months has had an impact. One of the things that staff have described to me is this idea of learning stamina. They've found that when young people and children have come back to school, they've been keen to be back at school, but they're not able to maintain that stamina, that interest, that wanting to carry on working on their learning. And that sort of swings it a little bit towards responsibility of pastoral staff and people in pastoral roles to have to motivate, to encourage, all those things which perhaps go unnoticed, which are so important. They talk about the fact that they found young people haven't got the same resilience, that they're ready to give up quicker, and perhaps not surprising because of the experiences that they've had. Shorter concentration spans. I've been talking to lots of staff over the last couple of weeks, and one of the things they've commented on is a recognition that they are going to need to refocus on routines again in the summer, because learning, despite what the front pages of the Daily Mail have said, has not been normal. And to get young people back into normal is going to take some time. There's going to be a need to rebuild relationships. Young people have not had the opportunity to see each other and mix with each other. Very clearly, and research supports this, a lot of issues with vulnerable children are only emerging very slowly. When children first come back to school, there was a bit of a honeymoon period, is what people have told me, with them being happy to be back and keen to be back. But that now has started to change into issues starting to emerge. And children that were not vulnerable before becoming more obvious and apparent, and a need for people to work with them. And that's perhaps because of this missed opportunities for socialization, and that has, I think, been growing realization nationally of the important contribution that schools do make to that socialization process, which enables young people to understand what are the expected norms in society, what are the expected ways of behaving, what is expected of them. Now, it's not all bad news, because the government has recognised this. They've recognised that there is a need to provide more emphasis and support for young people's mental health and their well-being, and they have put funding for it. That's the good news. This is what they call Wellbeing for Educational Recovery 2021-2022. However, if you look at some of the areas that have been worst affected by COVID, if we take Bolton as an example, Bolton is going to be given $39,829 to address all the issues that have emerged and will emerge from children's experience of the pandemic. I've actually worked that out, that it's £278.52 for every school in Bolton. So it's good that the policymakers are recognising that this is something we need to think about, but I'm not too sure how much we're going to achieve with £278.52 per school. One of the new books that's come out recently, again, a really good book to read, is a book called Thrive, The Purpose of Schools in a Changing World by Valerie Hannon and Amelia Patterson. And this talks about the idea of thrive, that rather than looking at the well-being of young people and the mental health of young people, we should be actually working to ensure that they can not just survive, but they can thrive. That the fundamental job of schools is to actually support young people in developing the skills, the knowledge, the understanding that they will need to be able to thrive in what is a very rapidly changing global world. So the question is, how do we adapt our pastoral systems and our pastoral structures? Now, this I've adapted from a book that was published again by members of NAPCE, Colleen McLaughlin, Caroline Large and Chris Watkins back in 1991. And they broke pastoral work down into 3 different focuses. Pastoral casework, which is very much looking at meeting the needs of the individual. We can see how that's going to be important if we're going to meet the individual needs of young people following their experience in the pandemic. The pastoral curriculum, which is a planned approach to support young people with developing those skills in resilience that I've mentioned earlier. And then pastoral management, which is a focus on a whole school approach, which is very much about developing the culture and the ethos of the school to support young people in the challenges that they will face. So if we think about pastoral casework, and I was interested in what Helen said about having performers, because pastoral casework needs to focus on the individual, but it needs to give time to pastoral staff to be able to do that. And it needs to be diagnostic, and proformers can help to be diagnostic. So you know what you're looking for, you know the questions that you're asking, you know the sort of areas that you're going to be explored. It needs to be based on evidence. Our response in pastoral casework shouldn't be, oh, I know this person, that's my instinct, that's how I think they are. It needs to be based on evidence. It needs to be looking in detail, because every person is going to be complex. It's not going to be a simplistic, very much as Maria was talking about her son. Sometimes people look for a simplistic answer to a problem rather than looking at the evidence and trying to look in some depth. And then you can have a focused intervention, which is actually targeting the needs of that individual. It does involve multi-agencies working together, and most important, it's transparent. We know what we're doing, we know why we're doing it. The pastoral curriculum is looking, it's a whole school approach. In my view, it's about pastoral people in pastoral roles thinking, as Maria said, not just about waiting for the problem to come and knock on the door, but thinking proactively, how can we develop learning experiences for young people which help them to learn not just content for examinations, but learn how they can develop as people and how they can be prepared for the challenges that they will face in the workplace and in society. So it is very much about developing a whole curriculum where pastoral staff and people in pastoral roles have an input in terms of developing those skills and personal qualities. And the third dimension is the focus on pastoral management of the school ethos, developing a culture, because that's the foundation. That's what makes everything else possible. If you've got the right culture, then all the other teaching and learning experiences that we provide will be successful. And adults have a very important role, as was said in the earlier presentation by Helen, that it's not just what you say, but it's your body language, and it's the tone, and it's how you move around the school and what you say and how you interact with people, which enables us to develop that safe and inspiring learning environment, which ultimately is the way that we can improve the life chances and the life experiences of young people. So to engage young people, I think we need an approach to pastoral care and pastoral support which focuses on developing structures and systems which are based on 4 areas. That we're looking to develop young people as global citizens. That recognizes the fact that we do live in a global world. The technology makes it very easy for us to live in that sort of global environment. That secondly, it is about supporting the socialization process. Suddenly, often we only become aware of the importance of something when it goes missing. And that socialization experience went missing why children were not in school. And if there is a purpose of school, then that's got to be one of them, to actually support that socialization process. Thirdly, it's about forming effective relationships and supporting young people to know how to form effective relationships. That is going to be important in their daily lives in society, but it's also going to be absolutely essential for working in the workplace, where they're going to need to work in different teams with different people and probably quite quickly move between different teams to support that team with their expertise. And fourthly, at the heart of it, it's about understanding ourselves. And one of the things which pastoral staff in schools and people in pastoral roles can do can help young people and give time to young people to help them understand themselves and their place in the world. So again, going back to the inspiration from the book Thrive, the purpose of schools in a changing world, I've adapted these ideas from that to achieve that in pastoral care, we need to help young people thrive in a sustainable world, and we need to be talking to them about that, because that is what's important to them. We've seen in the sort of climate debates and global warming discussions, that young people are very, very much aware of those issues and want that to be part of their education. We want to build thriving communities by helping young people with the socialization process. We want to help young people develop thriving relationships so they can work with different people. And to use Maria's word, not be judgmental, to actually form relationships, have empathy for other people, and understand things from different people's points of view. And the intrapersonal, to help young people with the inner growth of young people, to help them develop as people so they become more confident and able to take on the challenges and whatever the world might throw at them in the future. So just quickly to give a few examples from my work of where I've done that. Developing global citizens, one way that I did that was by what was called a Young Leaders Program. And what happened there was I had the crazy idea of bringing together children from a state comprehensive school, ordinary state comprehensive school from a disadvantaged area in the UK, with an independent school, which was an international school, which had young people from all over the world. I'll be honest, I was really nervous on the first day because I thought, are they going to get on? The rumours had gone round before amongst the state school children that the independent school were all going to be snobby and they wouldn't understand anything that they did. And the independent school equally were worried that they were going to be mixing with all these yobs and all these challenging children, and they didn't know how they were going to cope with that. In reality, within 30 seconds, they were all mixing, talking with each other. They realized they're actually exactly the same. And in some ways, the content of the program was looking at teamwork, it was looking at problem solving, but what was far more important was bringing people, young people together from all around the world, different countries, different backgrounds, and giving them the opportunity to learn by that experience. Another initiative was a young detective competition that we ran in schools. Again, it was nothing to do with geography, science, maths, or anything in the sort of academic curriculum, but its purpose was to support socialization. And we gave the young people in teams of 6 challenges which they had to do. They had to work to a deadline, which they found really challenging because normally, apparently, teachers give them a little bit longer. But it was very close to the experience that they would have when they go to work, where they've got to meet deadlines and they've got to work with other people and use the different skills. And it was very much the teachers stepping back as well, because the young people, if they squabbled with each other, they had to sort it out themselves. That was their problem. They had to function as a team and learn how to work as a team. And another initiative, this time looking at forming effective relationships, was the idea of a show in a day. Again, probably a very crazy idea, but what we did was to develop a show. One of the ones we did was Macbeth by Shakespeare, and to have 150 children putting that show on in the day, all doing different roles, some as actors, some as backstage, some as reporters, but everybody had to have a role, and everybody had to work in the team, and everybody had to meet the deadline. And what was achieved was actually superb, and it gave the children and young people a lot of confidence that they could form good relationships with people. And then finally, learning about ourselves. And I mentioned it earlier in the conference that one of the things I did was to set up a group of youngsters, 12, 13-year-olds, as researchers, and they went into the classrooms and did observations and then fed back. And lots of benefits came from that. But one of the things that perhaps they gained the most from it was they learned about themselves. They learned about what they are like as a learner in the classroom, and about what they worry about, and the fact that other people worry about similar and also worry about different things. These were some of the comments. I'll let you read them. These were the sort of comments that were made. Some people made comments about that was the best day I've had at school for a long time, which in some ways is great for the day, but a little bit sad about their normal experience. Great believer in group work. I believe that group work provides opportunities for developing social emotional skills through the experience of working with other people. And it's something that young people like. They like working in groups. They like working with other people and learning how to be successful working in groups. So group work, lots of positives. It gives opportunities for them to use their skills and expertise in situations which can be quite close to relevant situations that they are likely to face in their lives and in their future careers. It gives opportunities for different roles you can have within the group. You can have a team leader, you can have a team secretary, you can have a timekeeper. So it gives them real experience of having responsibility and collaborating with different people in those different roles. As I've already said, it's very much about learning from experience. It's learning from doing. It's not adults telling you that this is the way you should think and act, but you're actually learning that if we act this way, if we think this way, if we work this way, we're more likely to be successful, and we're developing that responsibility. It puts the challenge in because there's the challenge of the task, but also the challenge of meeting the deadline and working quickly with other people. It's a problem-solving approach. It offers opportunities for creativity, and it develops the communication skills, which are so central to what is going to happen to young people in their future lives. And most important, all of that builds confidence, because if there's one thing that we should aim to do in our pastoral work, is we should look to build the confidence of young people, because if young people leave feeling confident, they're far more likely, in my view, to be successful in their future lives. Now, one of the sort of challenges that I've had in the last few weeks is to think about, okay, it's really important to build a positive culture, and it's important that we encourage pastoral staff and pastoral leaders, to give that some value and to give it some time to actually build the positive culture, which enables young people to not just develop, but to thrive and to grow and to become confident members of the workplace and confident members of society in the future. But as a head teacher, I was well aware that I didn't make the rules, that I was being held accountable for the outcomes of my school. And therefore, I also had to think about what strategies will be successful in helping us to help those children achieve their full potential and to be successful. We did it with the right values. We didn't lose our values. We kept to the belief that it was what was important. Some of the things that you can see there on the building a positive culture, positive attitudes, giving young people ownership, involving them, having an empathy for them, empowerment, giving them opportunities to contribute. All of that was important. And despite the pressure that we were getting, that you've got to improve your English results, you've got to do more maths, you've got to do more science, we kept to those beliefs, we kept to those values, and we doubled the results in 1 year. We achieved the best results in the history of the school. And it was by establishing and developing and reinforcing that positive culture. But I think it's equally important that there is a clear strategic plan as well, because otherwise you will have a positive culture, but you won't be moving in any direction. You won't be moving in a direction which everybody can understand, and there's a momentum and a drive to move in a direction in the best interest of the young people who we're caring for and looking to make a difference for. So it is about having a clear strategic plan. It isn't about sitting in the pastoral office waiting for problems to come. It is about thinking strategically. What can we do using our available resources, using the expertise, the considerable expertise we've got amongst our staff, to achieve the goals that we want for our young people. So it's important, as the top of that diagram shows, that we do know what our goals are, that they're positive goals, that we do have a sense of purpose, that our actions are all focused on goals. They're not just focused on coping, even though sometimes that's important. And it is based on self-evaluation, a willingness to reflect on what we're doing and think, using the evidence, how could we do it better? How could we improve? And I know that whenever I go into schools, and I was guilty of it when I was in school as well, if only we had more money, if only we had more time, if only we had more staff. But in reality, it is about using the resources we've got and using them effectively. So it comes back really to Maria talking about the importance of us thinking about people as human beings. And what I'm arguing in my presentation this morning is that our pastoral systems, our pastoral structures, our pastoral work needs to be focusing on developing people as human beings and enabling them to thrive so they can take advantage of all the opportunities that are provided, and enable them to make a positive contribution to society. So my challenge to delegates at the conference and indeed people who are joining us later on catch up is to inspire and engage young people and children, to use the experience of the pandemic as a positive, to develop pastoral structures, pastoral systems, pastoral leadership that provides a learning experience that is relevant to learners in 2021. Please, if you've got any comments at all, please send them on Twitter. You can follow NAPCE on NAPCE at NAPCE1. That's my personal email there. Very happy for you to email me. The email address for NAPCE is there. It's admin@napce.org.uk. And the NAPCE website is www.napce.org. So that is going to be that's my contribution. I've been writing down questions while other people have been speaking and watching the chat. I haven't been able to do that. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question or to make a comment? We've got a few minutes. Okay, Maria, did you want to?
Can I just say a huge thank you to you for organising this event and for bringing so many people together. And I just wanted to say that I thoroughly enjoyed working with you for the past few years, and I couldn't have come across a more dedicated, I don't know, colleague, friend who really pushes the proactive pastoral care and, just working towards the status that we so desperately need as pastoral leaders. So thank you so very much, Phil. You did an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Is there anybody else that's got any other comments? That's brilliant. So I seem to have come out of something. Let's go back into. Okay, so it's my job now to bring what has been a really amazing 3 days, and I know many of you have joined us at different points, and I know many of you have actually been with us all through the 3 sessions. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for your contributions, and thank you for your passion and support for young people and children in schools. That's really appreciated. As I've already said, please send your tweets about the conference using the hashtag NAPCECon21. Please keep sending them. Please let's engage those people who weren't able to be here. It was sold out. The problem with being a sold out conference, which is free, is there may be other people who perhaps have not been with us all the way through. Sorry, I'll just get a question in the chat. I'll deal with that straight away. Actually, a question about the National Awards for Pastoral Care and Education. When will the winners be announced? Well, the winners will be announced at the presentation event, which is at the moment planned to take place on the 24th of September. We haven't made a final decision yet as to whether it's going to be a live event or an online event, but I think it's probably likely it's going to be an online event. And we're hoping, just like last year, that if you are one of our finalists, that you will get together. If it is an online event, that dress up for the evening, get together as a group. Dare I say, I think I can have a few drinks handy. And really enjoy the evening. But the announcements of the winners will be made on that night, and then the plaques and the prizes and the trophies will be on their way to those winners, and the certificates for all our finalists straight after that. Can I also say, if you would like to join and you're not already on it, the circulation list for the free NAPCE monthly newsletter, then please email admin@napce.org.uk. You'll probably understand that because of data protection, it seems a bit strange, but we have to ask you to ask us to be on the mailing list. But that is free. And the next edition, which comes out in a couple of weeks' time, we're looking to have some reports on the conference as well. So please look out for that. If you'd like to know more about, and I hope you will, the benefits of becoming a member of NAPCE, then once again email admin@napce.co.uk, or you can go to NAPCE and click on the button and it will take you straight to the page where you can sign up to be a member. Finally, 2022 will be the 40th anniversary of NAPCE. That's 40 years of promoting the importance of pastoral care and support as part of education. Started with people, as Maria said, like Michael Marland back in the 70s and the 80s. And we've got lots of events planned for the anniversary year. That includes the publication of a new book on pastoral care by NAPCE with Cambridge scholars. And we're also planning a face-to-face live conference where you can come along and meet people for real. Do you remember that? Wouldn't that be wonderful? And finally, just in time, absolutely brilliant. Can I thank again all our speakers? It's been really inspirational. You've given us so much to go away and think about and to prepare for what's sure to be a new, interesting but challenging academic year. And a big thank you to people on the Question Time panel, and also a really big thank you to everybody who's joined the conference and showed an interest in the conference, and for all the delegates who have joined. So it just comes to me now to say thank you very much, give everybody my best wishes for the summer, and on behalf of NAPCE, to thank you for being part of this conference and contributing to it. And what I'm going to do now, so we don't have that embarrassing moment where everybody sits and looks at each other, I'm going to say thank you very much. I'm going to bring the conference to an end and say goodbye to everybody, and thank you very much for what has been a brilliant and great event. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.